بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, we're on the 7th chapter of book 1, Bab al-Ghusl min al-Janaba. So the major ablution or ghusl or washing up from sexual or basically sexual impurity. So ghusl in the Arabic language basically washing something or pouring water over something, and janaba it's like a state of ritual impurity or a state of hadith al-akbar, which is after the intercourse. There's other reasons for ghusl obviously, but he mentions the main one, which is the most apt for making ghusl. The other reasons, besides the janaba, is from hayd or the girl's menstrual cycle, or nifas, the postpartum bleeding. And some scholars say also if a person becomes Muslim or when a person passes away, they should be washed. Right. So he starts off bab and ghusl and janaba. And janaba, some scholars say it comes from the word jamb, which means being next to, because the husband and the wife, they lay next to each other before having relations. And others say like from ijtanaba, which means to be away from. So when the person's in state of janaba, he's not supposed to do salat or make tawaf around the Kaaba and stuff like that. So he's staying away from those certain types of ibadah until he comes back into a state of ritual purification. The reasons for al-ghusl, he starts off خروج المني وهو الماء الدافق والتقاء الختانان or الختانين. So basically the emission of semen or ejaculation. Al-ma' al-dafiq is the one that is coming out with force, basically, right? So to differ in the sense that if a person has that coming out, but it's not like ejaculation is not with force of lust and stuff like that, it doesn't count. It has to be through a state of sexual intercourse or, for example, a nocturnal emission like a wet dream, and has to come out, in force, basically. That's the ejaculation. The semen comes out in force. والتقاء الختانين, basically the meeting of the two private parts. So if a man and a woman are having sexual relations, even if they don't ejaculate, it's still obligatory to take or to make a ghusl, to have ritual purification. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ, the first part, he said, إِنَّمَا الْمَاءُ مِنَ الْمَاءِ. So anytime emission occurs in terms of ensure it's semen or ejaculation for the man or the woman, then ghusl is required. And the other one, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا جَاوَزَ الْخِتَانُ الْخِتَانَ فَقَدْ وَجَبَ الْغُسْلُ. If the two, khitan is the circumcised part, basically. And he's talking about when a circumcised part of the man or the woman touch each other, it's just a way of saying having sexual intercourse. Even if they don't have emissions, they have to make ghusl, right? In the past, before it was permissible if they had sex and they didn't have ejaculation, that they didn't have to make ghusl. But then it was abrogated, and the Prophet ﷺ said, even if they have sexual relations, even if there's no emission, they still have to make ghusl. So ejaculation or touching of the private parts between man and woman. And some scholars go into great detail. Basically, if the male body part enters into any part of the female, in terms of the front or the back, it's considered obligatory to have ghusl. And you can find in the books of fiqh it gets even more detailed in terms of live or dead or anything. But basically, if there's connection between the sexual organs of any type, then ghusl has to be made. Is that clear? The mandatory parts of ghusl, the first is a niyyah, having the correct intention. So you have the niyyah to remove the hadith al-akbar from yourself, so you can have the ability to perform the certain acts of worship which requires tahara. And the second requirement, وَتَعْمِيمْ بَدْنِهِ بِالْغُسْلِ, washing the whole body with water, the entire body. And that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى حَتَّى تَعْلَمُوا مَا تَقُولُونَ وَلَا جُنُبًا إِلَّا عَابِرِ السَّبِيلٍ حَتَّى تَغْتَسِلُوا. O you who believe, approach not the prayer while you are in a drunken state, until you know the meaning of what you say, nor if you are in a state of janaba, which we just discussed, until you, or if you're traveling, until you wash. حتى تغتسلوا. So that's the proof from the Quran. And the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he ordered, if he was in a state of janaba, he would make the ghusl. The third requirement, according to the Hanabila, is al-madmada wastinshaq. So washing the mouth and the nose. The majority of scholars, the Jumhur of ulama, say that's not part of the ghusl. So if you have the correct intention and you go in and take a shower, for example, with the niyyah of removing the ritual and purification, then you can you've fulfilled your ghusl. The Hanabila say you have to wash your mouth and your nose because it's part of the body. Their dalil, can anybody guess? I think I mentioned it before to someone here, I'm not sure. They say that, so the Jumhur ulama say you just have to wash your whole body and have the niyyah and you're good. You don't have to do anything else for your ghusl to be sahih. The Hanabila say that you should wash your mouth and nose. They consider the mouth and nose as part of the body. So do you have any reasoning of why that would be? Like what would they use as evidence, for example?
Mouth and nose. Wudu.
What's that?
Wudu. When you make wudu. The sunnah of wudu.
Close. It has to do with wudu.
The fard of wudu.
So it's strange, and the fard of wudu for the Hanabila, you don't have to wash the mouth and the nose. But in the ghusl, they say that you do. The reason being is they say they divide the body into outer and inner. So they say the outer body is basically everything that the water can touch and is considered outside the body. And they say the nose and the mouth are part of that. And the evidence uses that. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you are fasting, وَبَالِغُوا فِي الْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ صَائِمًا, to like exaggerate in taking the water into your nose, except if you are fasting. So they consider the nose and the mouth to be outside the body as well. Because if it was inside, that would break the fast, right? If you put the water in your nose and your mouth. But it's outside. But the Jumhur of the ulama say that no, Allah said to wash, and He didn't specify, as He didn't specify in the ayat of wudu, to wash the nose and the mouth. So just as long as you cover your body with water and you have the correct intention, you fulfill the ghusl. So you can jump into the ocean with the intention of ghusl and you'll be okay. The Malikiyah, they add in addition to that dalk, which is like rubbing the body with water. And the correct opinion that Allahu Alam, according to the Jumhur, is you don't have to rub the body, but it's preferred if you can't to rub it, rub the water into your body. So those are the two main requirements according to the Jumhur: niyyah and washing the entire body with water. Is that clear? Hanabila, they say to add the mouth and the nose, and the Malikiyah, they say to add the dalk, which is rubbing the skin.
What would be the sake of that?
To do all of them if you can, obviously. Yeah, but if you're just, don't have sufficient amount of water, for example, or you're in a rush, you can just do the bare minimum, which is the niyyah and covering the body with water. The recommended acts is the starting off with Bismillah. Yes.
Did you cover already if you have to like make wudu from like right to left?
No, we're going to get in that now. So that's the fard part. That's what you do to be sufficient for having your ghusl. Now he's going to describe the sunnah. So the sunnah, start with the Prophet ﷺ, the Bismillah, saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, or Bismillah. And it comes from the hadith, كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ فيه بذكر الله عز وجل فهو أبتر. Any great affair that doesn't start with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is like loss, right? So the scholars derive from that for any type of worship or any type of good affair, you should start with the Bismillah. And then second, he says, ويدلك بدنه بيده, and he wipes or rubs the body with his hand. Right, that's also from the Sunnah. ويفعل كما روت ميمونة رضي الله عنها, and he's going to describe the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ now in this hadith, that the Maymuna, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, she narrated. So she said, سترت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فاغتسل من الجنابة فبدأ بغسل يديه ثم صب بيمينه على شماله فغسل فرجه وما أصابه ثم ضرب بيديه على الحائط والأرض ثم توضأ وضوءا للصلاة ثم أفاض الماء على بدنه ثم تنحى فغسل رجليه. So he said, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Maymuna, she said, I covered the Prophet, and he set her up to put a cover from that. And the scholars, they derive from this many rulings and wisdoms. Like first of all, the importance of covering yourself from being unclothed in front of other people, right? So she was covering the Prophet ﷺ, that's one. Also, that it's okay for the wife of a husband or the husband to look at the private parts of the wife and the wife look at the private parts of the husband. There's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ took a shower with Aisha radiallahu anha from the same container, she said. So the scholars derive from that it's also permissible to look at the private parts of your spouse. Because you'll find some madhab and some scholars saying that, you're not supposed to look at your private parts, even your own private parts or your wife's private parts or anything like that. But this hadith shows that it's permissible for the spouse to look at each other's private parts, and not for other people though. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ was covering. فَاغْتَسَلَ مِنَ الْجَنَابَةِ He was washing from janaba, the major ritual impurity, right? The state of being after having sexual relations. So he started washing his hands first. The Prophet ﷺ washed his hands. Then he poured the water over with his right hand on his left hand and washed his private parts, removing what has been affected, meaning like the woman's, fluids and stuff like that, and his own fluids. They washed that. He cleaned that first, and then he struck his hand against the earth or against the wall, they say, or the floor, something solid, earthen, to remove that dirt from his hands. And then he performed the wudu as the wudu of salah. Then he poured the water over his body, and in another narration he moved away to clean his feet and wash his feet after that. So some scholars say that that's because it was earth, and then there would be like muddy the earth that he was standing on, so he'd move away to wash his feet so his feet would be clean. In modern times we don't really need to do that because we're in the usually in a bathtub or a shower. It's contained and it's a clean area, so you can just do the wudu and that would be sufficient, inshallah. So this is the sunnah of the wudu. If you wanted to follow the complete wudu, is to follow the way the Prophet ﷺ did it, which is to include washing the hands, washing the private parts, making wudu, pouring the water over your whole body. Then he says, وَلَا يَجِبْ نَقْضُ الشَّعْرِ فِي غُسْلِ الْجَنَابَةِ إِذَا رُوِي أُصُولَهُ. And it's not mandatory to unbraid the hair from the janaba, for the major ablution, from ritual impurity, as long as the roots are saturated with water. So if you can get water to the roots of your hair, you don't have to unbraid it. And in the past, the Sahaba, the men and the women both had long hair, right? That's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So sometimes they would braid the hair and be in tight braids, and it would be hard for them to take it apart every time. So the Prophet ﷺ said it's permissible to just make sure that the water reaches the roots, and you don't have to unbraid your hair, whether man or woman. Also, the scholars say that you should avoid cleaning the private area with your right hand. The right hand is reserved for the good things, like we said, and you use the left hand for the other things that are of lesser importance, or for removing filth or cleaning yourselves. وَإِذَا نَوَى بِغَسْلِهِ الطَّهَارَتَيْنِ أَجْزَاءَ عَنْهُمَا. And if the person has a niyyah for having both taharat sughra, like wudu, and taharat kubra, the ghusl takes care of both of them. Like you don't have to make a separate niyyah for both. If you have a niyyah of ghusl, it takes care of the smaller and the greater purification. And that would be, for example, if you go in and take a shower and you make the niyyah of ghusl, you don't have to make wudu after that, right? Unless you want to follow the sunnah and make the wudu while you're in the shower. And this is important too, the niyyah, because if you're just taking a shower and you didn't make the niyyah for ghusl, it's not sufficient, right? So say you're just going into, it's a hot day, you rush in and take a shower, right? And you forgot to make the intention. Like say you had relationships with your wife, or you woke up and you had, a nocturnal emission or a wet dream or something like that, and you had to make ghusl. But you went and worked out, before salat, and then you were sweaty, you just went in and you wanted to make ghusl for cleaning yourself from the sweat, but you never made the intention to remove the janaba, right? In that case, the ghusl is not sufficient. So you have to go back and make the proper intention and wash correctly. So the intention is very important when you're making the ghusl. It's a form of ibadah, right? In the sense of getting yourself in a state of ritual purification. Hassan, you have a question?
Yeah, when you're making wudu, if you're like following the sunnah, would you have to say the bismillah again and then make the intention for wudu inside your ghusl? Does that make sense?
No, you're making intention for ghusl here, so it would just be this. The wudu is not for that purpose. It's just the way of following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first bismillah would be sufficient, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam.
When you make ghusl, you covered the wudu too, right?
Yeah, it covers. So the big purification covers the smaller purifications, right? The bigger niyyah for any type of ibadat encompasses the lower ibadat. وكذلك لو تيمم للحديثين أو للحدثين والنجاسة على بدنه أجزاء عن جميعها. And also if the person attended, like so say if you attended, major ritual purification will cover for both the lower and the major, right? And he's saying likewise if one makes tayammum with two types of ritual impurity, the major and the minor, as well as the filth on the body, it covers that for him as well. So when you make tayammum, obviously there's no water around, right? So even if you have filth on your body, you can't remove it. So that if you have the niyyah to have, like, according to the Hanabila, the removal of filth and the purification, it covers all of that, basically the one niyyah. But if you just had niyyah for one of them, it's not sufficient for the others. So always have your niyyah for like the greatest of the ibadat, and that will cover all the ones underneath it. So in this case, if you're making tayammum and you are in the state of janaba, you would make niyyah of removing the major hadith al-akbar, the major ritual impurity, so you can be in a state of ability to pray. وَإِن نَوَى بَعْضَهَا فَلَيْسَ لَهُ إِلَّا مَا نَوَى بِهَا. And like I said, if you intended only part of it, you only get what you intended for. So always be careful to make your niyyah for like the greater part that will cover all parts of the worship instead of just the smaller part, right? Even some scholars, they kind of distinguish that with the sunan and the faraid and stuff like that. Always, if you have to do a fard salat, that's what your intention should be, right? The greater of the two, not combining the sunnah with the fard. Or if you have to do tahiyyat al-masjid, or if you do ratab of dhuhr, for example, the major sunnah that Prophet always did, you make your niyyah for that, and then tahiyyat al-masjid will be underneath it. It will cover that for it. So that's the bab of al-ghusl. The issue of like shampoo and soap, some scholars say that you have to be careful if you're making ritual, purification, that you wash first with that and use the shampoo and soap after, or use the soap and shampoo first and then do the ritual purification after, just to avoid the water becoming tahir instead of tahur, right? We said that if the water is mixed with the substance, whereas it changes its smell or its taste or its color, it becomes, if it's a pure substance, it becomes tahir. And tahir you can't use for a ritual purification or for removing najasat, right? So therefore, if you're going to use shampoo or soap, do that first and then do the ghusl, or before or after.
I came across a hadith. I don't know if I remember it correctly, but the Prophet ﷺ ordered you could put lotus leaves or leaves of a plant inside the water to make it smell. Is that correct, or would that count as shampoo?
No, that's in the hadith for washing the dead bodies. You're supposed to make ghusl for them as well. It says in one of them to put that, but you're supposed to wash them 3 or 5 or 7 times. So the scholars say that the other waters will be pure, and then one of them is mixed with kafur, which is those type of leaves to make it nice smelling, right? So that's how they say that they fulfilled the original purification, then they add that scent to it afterwards. There are some scholars that use that argument that say that no, you can mix as long as it doesn't completely change, just to smell better or whatever. But to be on the safe side, just make sure you washed out the soap completely when you do the ghusl. What did you say? No questions?
Oh, you mentioned about the intention. If suppose I come home from working out, and then I'm filthy, I guess, and then I go to the bathroom and I want to make ghusl, but I'm not in a state of major impurity. Can I do that?
Yeah, you can do that.
And I just have the intention for ghusl, and I just take a shower and then
It'll cover for the wudu, yeah.
Okay.
You know how on Fridays you're supposed to, it's a sunnah to make ghusl before the salah?
Right.
If you already you have to make the intention every time, or you just every Friday you already know before you head out for the day, make a ghusl?
You make the intention so you can distinguish between the ada and the ibadah. So to make it different from you're just taking a shower, as opposed that you're actually making ghusl for Jumu'ah, right? And you're having the requirements of the ghusl. But usually, like your intention, you're doing it for the sake of Jummah, and you're saying the Bismillah, you're doing the wudu inside the, so you know you're making the ghusl. But that's, you don't have to declare it out loud or anything like that. But just like in your heart, the more you give focus to your intention and ibadat, the more reward you can reap from it. It's just kind of to make us conscious of our worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of just making it like a habit. So that's why it's important to always correct the niyyah and the intentions and the, why you're doing certain things.
Sure. I have a question, but it's not related to what we just spoke about. In which circumstances are you allowed to say like break your prayer? Like say like if you're in, like if there's an imminent threat or something like that.
Yeah, basically, if you have some type of harm that can result to yourself or to another person that you can prevent, going outside the salat, you can exit the salat for that reason. Yeah.
Would this be for sunnah or fard, or for both?
For both, because the presence of like saving life or avoiding harm overrides that. Like you can make up the salat, but you can't save the life again or something like that, or you can't avoid. There's some of the salaf that there's stories you can read that they would like never leave salat, for anything. There's I think Thabit, I forget, one of the pious predecessors, he was known for his salat, like always being, praying in the masjid and doing extra salat and stuff like that. And so there was a kind of an earthquake or something, and the masjid collapsed, and everybody was so sad. They're like, Thabit's dead. Because he's always in the masjid at that time, and they went and checked, and he was like in the tashahud, and then he said salam, and then they were all like, saying, we worried about you, we thought you were dead, the whole building's collapsed. And he said, I didn't even notice it until you guys told me right now. Like that's how focused he's in the salah, So there's levels and there's situations. It depends on exactly what you're in. But in general, if you can avoid a harm or prevent a harm, it's okay. If you can do it while you're in the salat, that's the best. Like say, without having you to exit from the salat, you can do an action like we talked about before. I think. No, we haven't got to Bab Salat yet. It's a different class. But yeah, in salat, you're allowed to do certain actions and certain movements as long as you don't completely turn away from the qibla or, lose total khushu' or something like that, or there's so many movements that you're like told, either the person's watching you, he'll be like, he's not praying, basically. But if you can do something like, even the Prophet ﷺ would open the door sometime for somebody, he would take certain couple steps, something like that. So if you can do an action without invalidating your salat, that's better. But if you have to move, like you see, a baby about to get hit by a car or go outside into the street, and you don't keep praying and let the baby go. You go and try to save the baby first. Yeah.
So how about say praying for say someone who's like mentally challenged?
What do you mean?
Is it like obligatory, or I mean I know like there's some, not everyone's at the same level, if like when I'm saying like mentally challenged, there's like they like say they still go to school, they can still like but special ed type thing. How about for them? Are they still like, is it mandatory for them, or?
No, I mean, Allah knows what's in their hearts and their capability. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Like Allah won't put a burden upon someone that he cannot bear, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, رفع القلم عن ثلاث النائم حتى يستيقظ والمجنون حتى يفيق والصبي حتى يبلغ. Like the pen has been lifted upon three: the one who is sleeping until he is woke, the one who is crazy until he becomes back to his senses, and the young person until he reaches the age of puberty, right? So before those times, the person is not taken into account. So if he falls under the point of not really understanding, being without common sense or logic, the pen is lifted upon him. He's not sinful, inshallah. Allah will forgive that. But if he's to the point where he can make tamayiz, he understands right from wrong, and he knows what he has to do, then that's different. Then he should be encouraged, obviously, to do the salat. Wallahu a'lam. So next week we're going to do tayammum. I think we got 5 more lessons until Ramadan. So we'll try to get through the Kitab al-Tahara, we'll finish inshallah, and then we'll do maybe a couple abwab from Kitab al-Salah and take a break probably in Ramadan. Wallahu a'lam. Inshallah. يلا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك جزاكم الله خيرا.